News Radio 560 KPQ. Our time is 1:38. Our very special guest at this time is Sergeant Jonathan Ernst, a regular visitor to our program that we haven't talked to in a while. Sergeant, welcome back.
Well, thanks, as usual, for having me, and I appreciate it.
It's the end of the school year. Graduation's taking place. A lot of people make decisions regarding their future, and sometimes they may be talking to you about that. What do they say?
Well, the more often than not, it's what can you do for me?
Well, they want you to do something for them?
Self-interest is an important thing, right, to a degree. If you're not interested in yourself, what are you doing, right?
It's healthy.
Now, you can cross a line with it, obviously, but no. So, I mean, when you go to purchase a car, right, you're looking for something. So if you're coming to me, you're obviously looking for something. It's not just not mere curiosity. Generally speaking, no. And obviously there's exceptions to the rule like anything else. You have your outliers. But most of the time it's what's available, what are the qualifications, what are the bonuses, what are the job opportunities, what are the differences between branches of service. But more often than not, in the market that I'm recruiting out of, we don't have as many that just come to us, so we're out finding them. So the message is obviously a little different at that point. It's, look, these are the things I can do for you if you're willing to do this for us. So,
and do men about to graduate from high school, do they have that level of curiosity to know what they want, or are they just curious to know that you have something maybe for them?
I'd be 100% honest with you. And this is even national news to a degree. The propensity for enlistment is gradually declining every year for those that have interest. We see a higher proportion every year of people who are enlisting that had prior service family members. That pot actually gets bigger every year per capita in the Army. And those that are just hearing the message for the first time or just learning to understand about it, it's usually because we've reached out to them. The whole marketing adage, it takes 3 to 7 contacts before you're even going to have a legitimate interest perked in just about anything, whether that's breakfast cereal or an automobile or, like in my situation, to just be curious enough to sit down and actually talk with a recruiter and figure out what's going on.
Does the Army need more technically trained people right now to run all the computers and the sightings and all the high-tech stuff that you use on a daily basis?
Yes, and that's also a portion that you see in the decline in the propensity to enlist is with technological advances comes we need more technologically savvy people. Right. And I will never, again, sugarcoat. So when you come in and you're looking at an IT job, well, we're not starting off at the same pay Microsoft is. And people are well aware of that. At the same time, Microsoft isn't paying to put you through your C++ training and your, all the other stuff that goes into code writing and this and that and the other thing.
Microsoft wants you trained before you get there.
Exactly. I'd say the overwhelming majority that aren't family members of those that have already served are primarily focused on the college benefits of service, quite frankly. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's one of the reasons it's out there. If you're willing to serve your country, they're willing to make sure you're, at a minimum, if you apply yourself properly, your bachelor's is taken care of.
And how long do you have to serve before you get to go back to school?
Well, you can start going to school right away if you have the means to juggle your schedule. The Army will start paying for it. After your first year in service, they start throwing $4,000 a year tuition assistance at you, which is meant to supplement part-time education while you're in service.
Right.
However, the way I did mine was I leveraged multiple programs, and because I was a service member, my taxable income is pretty low comparatively for somebody that's been doing the same job. I have plenty of other benefits that offset that.
Sure.
But my taxable income was low enough for me to qualify for a full Pell Grant, so I was getting a full ride just based on that $4,000 a year from the tuition assistance and then the federal aid money.
Are there unusual benefits that are only available to someone in the service that we should know about?
Well, I mean, the GI Bill itself is a pretty unusual benefit. So that one is, you start earning benefits after 90 days of honorable service. You get the full package after 3 years of honorable service. 3 years of active duty gets you, literally, it pays 36 months, not to be confused with 3 years. For those of you doing college math, that's 4 years of college, 9 months a year, plus your summers off, right? up to the highest in-state tuition rate for the highest public school in the state. So in Washington, University of Washington, they cover your tuition.
Wow.
In addition to that, if you're no longer in service, because you can use that benefit after your first enlistment while you're in, but if you're out of service, you get a housing allowance, which is based off of the equivalent of you being a sergeant and whatever the local housing rate is for wherever you live. So in this area, for example, if somebody gets out of the Army and wants to attend Central Washington University, they're going to get their tuition paid. They're going to get a $1,000 a year book stipend, and they also get a housing allowance the entire time they're enrolled in school. So again, don't confuse it with the summer months, but they will pay you in this area. It's about $1,400 a month that they're going to pay you for housing in addition to paying your tuition while you're in school.
And who at Uncle Sam's corrects your papers? How do we know you're getting good grades?
Well, the GI Bill is a little different. That's managed more so by the school and their academic standards. While you're in service, the tuition assistance, if you score lower than a C on any undergraduate class, the service member has to pay that money back, and they do not get any more tuition assistance until that's done. You also have to maintain a 2.0 GPA for your undergraduate. If you're in graduate studies like myself, you have to maintain a 3.0, and if you have a grade lower than a B, you have to return that money to them.
Let's talk about your education now, because you're continuing with it, obviously. What made you want to do that?
Well,
besides,
one,
you're rather curious. But
one, it's an earned benefit. Two, I've had a passion for what I've been studying, and that would be politics for quite some time now. And the tertiary piece of that puzzle is I realized after about 8 years of service, it took me a while, that to maintain a competitive edge in today's society, you have to be a lifelong learner. There's no way around it. So
it's good for the brain, too.
Well, yeah, it helps you live longer. That's a proven fact, too. People that continue to seek education have less problems with memory loss and things of that as you push through lower diagnosis of Alzheimer's and things of that nature, dementia. But leave that aside. I have a family to raise. So a while ago when I was on the show, I talked about the My Legacy campaign that we were starting over there. I'm leaving a legacy in my children, right? What is Sergeant Ernst leaving behind? In order for me to leave the best product back for my children, I have to continue to excel for two reasons. One, especially we talk about advances in technology. How can I stay up to date on the latest cutting edge stuff and work in those fields if I don't continue to learn that stuff specifically? The other piece of the puzzle is my children, and I would like to argue as a community, our children need to see people doing that to understand that that's what you have to do to be successful as well. I think that's one of the things that we can do collectively to bridge the gap for those that have concerns over, I hear it all the time, entitlement society, right? Everybody wants everything handed to them. We want instant gratification. Well, if we're setting the example for our children, my kids see that I am 40 years old and I'm still in college. And I'm not still in college because I just started. I'm still in college because I'm going to keep being in college, right?
And you're working for your master's?
I'm working on my master's right now. My goal is to accomplish my doctorate degree before I retire from service.
There you go.
And then I will have a path of careers laid out for myself afterwards.
Dr. Ernst, I knew you when you were just a sergeant. Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah. Oh, I joke because I also aspire to make the rank of sergeant major in the Army.
Whatever.
So Sergeant Major Dr. Ernst or Dr. Sergeant Major, I'm trying to figure out which way it's supposed to go.
I will not stand in your way. I know that you're a hard charger. Now, you joined the Army right after 2001.
Yeah, roughly. It was 2002 that I actually enlisted. I shipped off to basic training January 2003. I had my own hurdles getting into service. So I'm to be 100% honest. As a youth, I wasn't the prime candidate for a recruiter to chase down. I had some issues that I had to work through to prove to them that I was a investment worth making.
And they said, you want to join the Army, but your background leads us to believe that you're not going to be any good in the Army. What they say?
Well, I mean, you got to remember, every enlistment is the taxpayer's dollar, right? And we have our ebb and flow and ups and downs, just like any other career field where you got good people, you got bad people. Some people make the name significantly worse. Society, human nature, we remember a lot more of the negative than we do positive historically. Sure. We certainly broadcast it, the negative aspects on the news, and our social media feeds are filled with negative, overwhelmingly so, in my opinion.
I just had to get rid of some friends last week. It was just too dark.
Just too dark, right? And you start keying in on problems that we manifest some of the issues that we constantly gripe about by continuing to gripe about them.
Well, I wonder, since you joined, has the training the average training for the guy who's got to take the Army laptop into the field, has it changed dramatically since you were trained?
It changes every day.
How do we stay even with that? And I'm sure the Army has a plan, but in your mind, how do we stay even with something that changes every day?
Well, fortunately, and I don't think this is a hidden fact, yes, we have a huge defense budget, right, in this country.
I've noticed.
The overwhelming majority of that defense budget isn't to pay pensions and to pay soldiers. It's to pay for that technology that's coming in and the subsequent training required to maintain that edge. So where did GPS start? In the military. Where did the Internet really start? I will argue with Al Gore if he'd like. I will sit down and have the conversation.
No, I met the guy who did it.
He did not invent the Internet.
I met the dude who made it with a friend of his at UCLA, and it was for scientists to communicate with one another.
Right, and absolutely. But when you get into the WWW piece,
and then the Army said, well, why can't we use it too?
Exactly. So the Army has spearheaded night vision technology. All these technologies that you see available out on the Garmin. When the Garmin first came out, you were lucky if you could get within a football field of where you thought it was telling you to go, right? At that time, the Air Force was already dropping missiles down chimneys from thousands of feet away. A free-falling object in a chimney, right, because of the technology that's involved. We get the technology first, quite frankly, and that's why that defense budget's so big. A lot of people don't understand that there's actually a secondary effect to where you get that technology to lower cost because most of the research and development piece has been spent through that Department of Defense package.
Now, a political science student would tell you there's other reasons behind the funding as well, but that's something for us to all wrestle with when we vote for our senators.
So there's no doubt that there's been fraud, waste, and abuse. That's why we have a whole regulation on how to identify it and report it within service, too. So it's, and that's going to happen anywhere there's politics. What is politic?
Or wherever there's money, really.
No,
there's
absolutely,
a lot of money.
Right. We can contend that the barter system's better. Guess what? Somebody's still going to barter more one way than the other, depending on what's most beneficial to them, right?
So if someone listening is curious enough just to have a conversation with you, what should they do? How should they arm themselves for that encounter?
Come in with an open mind and understand that I don't have any contracts in my pocket. I'm not trying to snatch people up and send them to war.
You're not shanghaiing anybody?
No, absolutely zero. There's no draft anymore. The news break. Let's throw that one up on the alphabet networks. There is no draft. It's been gone since the end of the Vietnam era.
But what you told me that I couldn't believe is that the Army's turned into a far more efficient machine since the draft.
Significantly, because everybody that is there, at least in theory, obviously some people get a rude awakening. They get the basic training, get the job. It's not their cup of tea. But that's a small portion of the populace. Most of us want to be here. That's why we volunteered to do it. Tell me who you want to build a house with, 100 people that are told they have to be there or 10 people that are showing up to do that job because that's their motivation.
It's turned out to be a much better Army as a result.
In my humble opinion.
I trust your humble opinion because I know the attitude I had when I was getting a lot of mail from Lyndon Johnson, and I had reason to believe that he was going to finally find me at one time. Anyway, I'll tell you more about that off the air sometime. We'll be back in just one moment. Our guest is Sergeant Jonathan Ernst. When we come back, he's the only guy I know that's been to North Korea. We're going to ask him about what's in the headlines when we get back.
You're listening to The Agenda on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com. The Agenda with Michael Knight on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com.
And at 1:55 in the afternoon, I bid you, well, thanks for listening, okay? That's what I do. I say thank you. Robert Mulder was our guest. He was a candidate for Chelan County Commissioner, District Number 2. Sergeant Jonathan Ernst from the U.S. Army Station in East Wenatchee is our guest. He's a regular visitor. I think we met at a home show. Don't ask me how this got started. But anyway, he comes by all the time. We talk about Army stuff. We talk about recruiting. We talk about a future in the Army. We talk about a career in the Army. And we talk about just getting curious enough to almost join the Army, which happens a lot. And I always ask you this question, but who was the last guy you talked to about joining up, and what did he say?
Well, I have an applicant that's actually down at the Military Energy Processing Station today that I've spoken with.
Is he a happy camper?
Yes. He has spent the past 7 years trying to become a journeyman electrician. And usually people that are in that realm are pretty set with where they're going. He approached me about 4 months ago, about 35 pounds overweight. And I was very busy that day. And I took his height and weight. And I said, you got to lose about 4 inches off your waist or 35 pounds, and then we can really sit down and start to figure this out. If you want some help, we're here this day, this day, this day. You can come work out with us.
Well, I thought I'd lose all that weight in basic training. No. Show up a little slimmer, Bubba.
Yeah, basically. And this doesn't happen often. Usually that guy disappears. Well, literally 4 months later, he calls me and says, I lost 4 inches off my waist. Can I come in and talk to you?
Well,
yeah, who's this? This is Dalton Tolliver. I was there about 4 months ago, and I'm throwing pseudo names out there, you
right.
know. So he did what he needed to do. But this was something that he had already researched on his own and realized that's the way he wanted to go. And now he's going to join the Army as a combat medic with a guaranteed airborne contract. And
well, how's this electrician going to become a medic? Are you going to train him for that?
We're going to train him. Yeah,
And why did he say? I'm just curious why he chose that field, because
he had multiple career paths that he was interested in.
There's a lot of demands on a man to be a medic.
No, absolutely. But there's a lot of benefits from having those kind of credentials when you get out of service too.
Absolutely.
So, the combat medic is their training's in between an EMT and a paramedic. One of the drawbacks that we've historically had in the Army is licensure coming out. Medics, they've actually got it figured out now, and every year you have to recertify whatever state you're stationed in, your EMT license. So when they get out, they're at least qualified to be EMTs. And then through most of their college transfer program, when they get their transcripts from the Army reviewed, they're usually not far away from being able to, a year worth of their own schooling to become a paramedic.
We've only got 30 seconds, Sergeant Jonathan Ernst, but I said that you were the only guy I know that's been to North Korea. What do you think about these talks, and what do you think may be the outcome? Now, you're not an expert, you're just an observer.
I'm baffled. I don't know what to expect. I wish I had an answer. I do have a positive outlook on it based on this. They're talking. I mean, that's more than that's happened in how many decades now?
Since 1950. Well, actually, Jimmy Carter was there for a while, but that didn't last.
Yeah, and that was also he was no longer the president. That was kind of a backdoor to Bill Clinton, as I recall.
You're absolutely right.
So, there was no official sanctioned meeting between the two world leaders, and there hasn't been since the war. So
they agreed and then never signed it.
Concur. And, well, it wasn't his place to make the agreement, quite frankly. There was a great initiative on his part, and that was some stuff that he pursued.
Never didn't float.
Well, yeah, because you got to get the backing of the people that actually make the agreement. I mean, what was North Korea agreeing to? Peace with Jimmy Carter or peace with the United States? You know what I mean? Or peace with South Korea. So, they made an agreement with Jimmy Carter. So for all we know, they held true. I don't think
Congress did not endorse that agreement, if you remember how that came out.
I do recall them not. And that's right around the time I got into politics. But I know you're running out of show time, so we can